This one is going to be complicated for me, and I can't say as I write this what I'll think of this book when I come out on the other side. The Forgotten Warrior was once my favorite book in the series. I reread it many times throughout my life, either in pieces or in full, and I still hold it close to my heart. However, I also know that most of my love for this book revolves around a few specific scenes that I enjoyed mostly in concept. I expanded upon and changed the ideas for Paws of Stars, and, in fact, having the chance to do that was my main motivator for writing that series. I know that the scenes as I wrote them in Paws of Stars do not exist in this book, and I know that some of this book's plot will instead revolve around elements that I don't like at all. Needless to say, my idea of what the Forgotten Warrior is has been muddled significantly, and I don't know if I will love it, despise it, or be somewhere in between by the end of the video. But that's part of what this series is for. It's finally time to confront this thing, and see how I really feel about it. The Forgotten Warrior came out on November 22nd of 2011, about 7 months after Sign of the Moon, 3 months after The Rescue and Crooked Star's Promise, and the same day as the second entry in the SkyClan manga trilogy. As with Sign of the Moon, this book was written by Cherith Baldry, which at least partially explains the weight between these two main series entries. Cherith was also the writer for Long Shadows and Sunrise, the last two books in Power of Three, which are relevant to this book, let's say, in more ways than one. Power of Three ended in a rather messy fashion, with both character and plot arcs being left unfinished, and this book attempts to follow up on them pretty directly, while continuing the story Omen of the Stars has had so far. We'll just have to see if it was successful in either or both endeavors. First, though, we need a quick allegiance check-in, which, as has been the trend through Omen of the Stars, really will be quick. The only big change is that Dovewing and Ivypool have become warriors, giving ThunderClan a whopping 28 warriors instead of 26, and leaving them with no apprentices. Otherwise, there are no changes across ThunderClan and no major changes anywhere else. The total speaking cast for this book has shrunk since the last book, with the tribe and ancients no longer being a factor. This time, we have 73 cats in our speaking cast instead of 101, but the top 10 cats in that cast still manage a respectable 67% of the lines, implying a larger role for our background cast. Tied with Fading Echoes, this book does have the smallest percentage of she-cats in the cast, at 45%, but the she-cats in that cast get 53% of the lines, which is actually the highest of the arc. With all that being said, let's see what this book has to offer. The prologue opens with a loner talking to a strange traveler headed to the lake. Both seem familiar with, but not particularly respectful of the clans, and the traveler announces in their head that they have returned, and it is time for vengeance. Moving into the main chapters, everyone has been back from the tribe for a moon, but Jayfeather still finds himself distracted by thoughts of his lost life with the Ancients and the additional prophecy he received from the line of Stonetellers. Not distracted for long, though, because he won't really bring up either again for the entire rest of the book. At least Briarlight is keeping an eye on him, and Jayfeather is concerned about her well-being as well. Briarlight finds the patch of Hollyleaf's fur that Leafpool hid in the stores back in Sunrise, causing Jayfeather to become even more irritable than usual. Remember, he didn't even know about that fur before this moment. Briarlight leaves, and Bumblestripe comes in to say that Dovewing has been having bad dreams, which Jayfeather knows must be connected with her experiences in the mountains. He doesn't really have any advice. Actually, both Dovewing and Ivypool have been having restless dreams lately, and Jayfeather lets us know that Ivypool hasn't been telling him much of anything about what is happening in hers, in the Dark Forest. Also, Berrynose is being a good dad to Cherrykit and Molekit. Ivypool and Dovewing are both exhausted, and Whitewing tries to check on them, but both of them have so many secrets that they can't say much. Dovewing tells Ivypool that her full hearing hasn't returned since she left the mountains, and she feels like she's deaf. On Whitewing's orders, Ivypool goes to help Jayfeather with his herb gathering, with neither of them being happy about it. The marigold that Jayfeather has been growing was eaten by rabbits, but Ivypool finds a clump stored safely in a tree, as if someone left it there. Also, Birchfall comes by to say that he noticed Ivypool training with Hawkfrost in the Dark Forest. So, he's there too, I guess? He joined 3 nights ago, apparently just because he finds the training and ability to get stronger useful. He says nothing more on it, at least. He helps her track down some fox dung to put on the marigold to keep the rabbits away, leaving them both very stinky. They wash off in the stream, dividing their territory from Windclan, getting them into a conflict with a Windclan patrol. Breezepelt, as a fellow Dark Forest trainee, tries to stop Windclan from fighting, but Birchfall wants to fight anyway and gets told off by Sorreltail for it, causing Ivypool to fear for how bloodthirsty her father has become. Whitewing checks in with Dovewing again about her bad dreams, worrying that she was too young and inexperienced to go to the mountains to begin with, or lead the beaver journey. Dovewing has always had too much responsibility for her age. Whitewing thinks she should have time to settle down and rest with someone like Bumblestripe. He's so polite and loves Dovewing very much. After all, Dovewing needs a mate to keep the clan going. Dovewing gets uncomfortable and leaves, having some fun with a group of young warriors before finding herself at the ShadowClan border, where she meets Tigerheart. Dovewing doesn't want to speak to him after the last books, but he wanted to see her to let her know that Dawnpelt has been acting weird ever since Flametail's death. She thinks it was Jayfeather's fault that he drowned, and she might want revenge. Molekit and Cherrykit get excited hearing about the skirmish with Windclan, and Lineblaze says exactly one line to them about how they should settle down. Brightheart takes this as a sign that he's having fun with them and will make a good father, which brings him and Cinderheart silent pain, as they simply can't be together while he's part of this super important prophecy. Firestar makes Molekit and Cherrykit apprentices, since the new warriors were all getting frustrated having to do apprentice chores, and Molekit gets rightly upset that they're just being promoted to work. Also, Sorreltail is going to have more kits. Ivypool tells Lineblaze about the Windclan skirmish, and Lineblaze asks if Birchfall is involved with the Dark Forest, to which Ivypool, lies, and says he isn't. Briarlight has been doing good work around the medicine den, most recently putting away the cobwebs that Molepaw and Cherrypaw brought back. But Jayfeather is sure he doesn't want to take on an apprentice right now. Meanwhile, Brightheart is going to be teaching the apprentices her unique suite of battle moves on Firestar's orders, and Windclan has been antsy lately, convinced that someone, maybe ThunderClan, has been trespassing on their territory. Molepaw and Cherrypaw were attacked by a fox, but saved by a mysterious stranger. Jayfeather checks Molepaw's mind to see his memory of the event, but even there, all he can see is a vague shape with no indication of who it could be. Ivypool apologizes for potentially bringing a fox to the territory with her dung idea, and Jayfeather finally figures out that Dovewing can't use her power like she used to. Dovewing storms off upset, and Jayfeather immediately goes on with his business, talking to Lineblaze about how the mysterious cat may well be Hollyleaf. The Dark Forest is working on climbing tonight, with the traditional Dark Forest ruthlessness and casual insults. And this time, it is not just Shredtail, but Antpelt leading the exercise and yelling at everyone. Since Antpelt died, he became a full warrior rather than a trainee, and he has been taking to it easily. Breezepelt is mad about this. Minnowtail wins the climb, and everyone else is told by Shredtail to jump off the tree, taking the wind out of them and potentially causing injuries. Antpelt chides Ivypool as she gets down and goes on gleefully about how Windclan and Ivypool's kindness to him don't matter anymore. The Dark Forest is his home now, and he deserves it. He then attacks her, just for fun. Ivypool then does some training with other trainees and remarks on how cool it is that she can be part of this group where cats from different clans get along so well. When they aren't beating each other up for fun, I guess. Ivypool and Dovewing attend the gathering, where One Star tries to formally accuse ThunderClan of trespassing, and Firestar tells him off for accusing them with precisely no evidence. There is a cat on their territory, but no one knows if it's ThunderClan or any clan. Hollowflight, a RiverClan trainee, tries to catch Ivypool in a conversation about the Dark Forest, which she has no interest in. Meanwhile, Dovewing was cornered by Tigerheart, who wanted to talk about Dawnpelt again, and give, apparently, the exact same warning as before. Lineblaze gets an idea that Windclan may have spotted a rogue, the same mysterious figure who saved Molepaw and Cherrypaw, and he ends up finding Soul in a tunnel, who is still as passive-aggressively kind as he ever was. Most cats are not happy to see Soul when Lineblaze brings him back, but Poppyfrost and Berrynose assume he must have saved their kits, and persuade Firestar to at least let him stay a while. Soul catches up with his old friend Purdy and tells the children wild stories of his heroism. Then Dovewing turns down Bumblestripe's offer of a private walk through the forest, and Cinderheart criticizes her for trampling on his heart, insisting that if there aren't obstacles to getting to know a cat better, you should take the opportunity. Cinderheart, there aren't any real obstacles for you and Lineblaze in this obvious projection. Just go and talk to him and leave Dovewing alone. Dovewing caves to the pressure and goes after Bumblestripe. They end up talking briefly and then going on a race, during which Dovewing realizes she is beginning to hear everything again. Bumblestripe takes her to his favorite place in the forest and tries to move into a deep conversation about StarClan, which Dovewing turns to a more comedic tone. It doesn't feel like a night with Tigerheart, but just being able to walk and joke with a clanmate is nice. During training the next day, Cinderheart, Lineblaze, and then Ivypool each end up pointing out her happiness, and after some dropped hints from Cinderheart, Ivypool finds out about Bumblestripe. She highly approves and asks if they'll become mates. Dovewing says that is the last thing on her mind, and Ivypool immediately follows up with how cute their kits would be. Dovewing is at least able to subtly communicate to Lineblaze that her powers are back, the real source of her happiness. Jayfeather meets Yellowfang in a very distant, private area of StarClan where others can't hear them. She tells him to trust no one and recruit another medicine cat for ThunderClan. Not Leafpool, since she's a warrior now, or Briarlight or Brightheart, who help out without formal training, but obviously Cinderheart, because she may have some of Cinderpelt's memories and herb knowledge. Yellowfang orders Jayfeather to walk in her dreams and hire her, or she'll do it herself. Leafpool comes to see Jayfeather because Spotted Leaf told her about Yellowfang's plan and disapproves of it. But Jayfeather isn't inclined to agree with any arguments coming from Leafpool. That said, he does decide not to ask Cinderheart this day. Ivypool meets Tigerheart in the Dark Forest, who takes a pause from eagerly listening to Kill the Clan's propaganda to let her know that he didn't tell Dovewing about what Ivypool almost did to Flametail's spirit. Ivypool then gets called away by Hawkfrost to work with the other apprentices, and asks him if Sol is in the Dark Forest too. Hawkfrost doesn't explicitly answer, but says that he is a welcome presence in ThunderClan. Sol himself then decides to mosey on over to ShadowClan to pay them a friendly visit. None of our main cast even remotely trust him. One Star shows up with a patrol to order Firestar to drive Sol away, which they don't because they don't want to be ordered around by another clan, even though they also don't want Sol there. Several of the younger warriors, those who aren't our protagonists, are taken in by Sol though. Sorreltail has her kits, early and stiff, a long way out of camp, and Dovewing leads Jayfeather to her to help. Briarlight gets the herbs to send to her, and Leafpool helps Sorreltail due to being her friend. After the fact, warriors get Sorreltail and her kits back to camp. Daisy helps them settle into the nursery, and Brightheart stays up to check on them so Jayfeather can get some rest. Boy, this sure feels like proof that ThunderClan doesn't need another medicine cat. Dovewing hears Sol and some young warriors planning an attack on Windclan without telling Firestar. She and Ivypool eventually find a tunnel that must have been Sol's escape route and go down to try and find him. Dovewing's senses get mixed up underground, but they do find Sol talking to Windclan warriors, telling them to attack ThunderClan. Dovewing and Ivypool don't know how to get back out, and need to do it silently, so a stranger steps in, introduces herself as Hollyleaf, and with no time for explanation, leads them out to ThunderClan territory. Apparently, Hollyleaf was also the one to lead Ivypool and Blossomfall out when they got stuck in the collapsing hole in the last book, along with the one who really saved Molepaw and Cherrypaw. She explains that Sol has been plotting for the last half-moon and plans to lead the attack through the tunnels to catch ThunderClan by surprise. Hollyleaf tries to flee now that they are out, but Lineblaze won't let her get away again. They head back to camp and Hollyleaf is rapidly questioned. She explains that she has been living in the tunnels this whole time, and Lineblaze and Jayfeather privately talk about whether or not it's good that she's back, considering how complicated her exit was. Hollyleaf asks them both to come on a walk with her so she can ask them what they said and what they will say about Ashfur's death. They explain that they won't say anything. Hollyleaf's self-imposed exile was enough of a punishment, and they want their littermate back. It wasn't up to her to decide that they were better off without her. Jayfeather realizes in his head that Hollyleaf could be the fourth cat they need for the prophecy, and Hollyleaf agrees to at least stay until Sol is taken care of. Jayfeather goes to the Moonpool to try speaking to Ashfur, but is cut off by Bluestar, who says nothing could be gained by talking to him. Why he ended up in StarClan is not anyone's place to know or judge. Even in StarClan, they can't say if Hollyleaf or Ashfur or both or neither deserve to be with them. It sure does sound like no individual cats in StarClan get to decide who goes to StarClan. Wow, isn't that an interesting piece of lore? We'll come back to this much later, like years from now. Sol has disappeared, and Firestar has opted not to warn any of his warriors that Sol is imminently planning an attack between them and Windclan, for what I can only assume are very good reasons. Also, some cats are suspicious around Hollyleaf, either because she was gone so long, or because she reappeared exactly when Sol did. Thornclaw puts together that Hollyleaf originally disappeared around the time of Ashfur's unsolved death, and while cats are shocked, it would make sense if she did the deed. Lineblaze tries to cover for her, but Hollyleaf steps in to say that Ashfur's death was her fault. She explains how Ashfur threatened her and her littermates, but just as she is about to explain the murder, Brambleclaw cuts her off to lie and say that Ashfur attacked Hollyleaf first in his aims to hurt her, and Hollyleaf had to kill him in self-defense. This, combined with it being revealed that Hollyleaf really saved Molepaw and Cherrypaw, gets most of the clan on her side. Hollyleaf wants to run away, given that her secret is out now, but she agrees to stay, because the clan needs her. Firestar calls Dovewing into his den to ask her to look in on Windclan, where they find that One Star is looking for ThunderClan intruders as much as Firestar was looking for Windclan, but he doesn't seem to be mentioning Soul. Bumblestripe is very, very impressed that Dovewing was personally called into Firestar's den, and Dovewing stops to ponder how nice it is to ignore her powers when she's with Bumblestripe and be a normal cat. Bumblestripe then insists in a training session that he partner with Dovewing instead of his sister Blossomfall, which angers Blossomfall and causes her to take out her bitterness on scorning Dovewing's technique. Dovewing tells Bumblestripe to make up with Blossomfall, as family is more important than friendship, and Bumblestripe says he hoped they were more than friends. Dovewing thinks about Tigerheart again and tells herself that she can't be with him, but that Bumblestripe is at least an option. Mousefur calls Jayfeather over to chastise him, because she has figured out that he knew about Ashfur and Hollyleaf and hid it because it was convenient for him. However, she agrees that bigger things are coming, a darkness that has filled her dreams, causing Jayfeather to wonder if she is the fourth cat. Hollyleaf comes back with Purdy and reminds Jayfeather that she is living here only on Brambleclaw's lie. Then Lionblaze comes to complain about how he and Cinderheart can't be together because of his destiny. Jayfeather decides to personally solve this problem by showing Cinderheart that she's a special Destiny cat too. He takes her through a collection of Cinderpelt's memories until Cinderheart can remember them herself, becoming as much Cinderpelt as she is Cinderheart. Then he tells her she is Cinderheart anyway and should live her life as she sees fit. Broken Star calls a gathering of the Dark Forest to announce that it is almost time for them to prove their strength, skill, and loyalty so their clanmates at the lake and in the Dark Forest will honor them. He doesn't say when it will happen, but he wants them to be ready for the signal. Ivypool goes to Hawkfrost and asks to speak to Broken Star to become a full Dark Forest warrior. Broken Star asks her to fight Antpelt, proving she can succeed against him a second time, and Ivypool knows only one of them can survive this time. Antpelt is much stronger and more ruthless than when he was alive, but Ivypool is eventually able to catch him off guard and kill him, causing him to disappear forever. Broken Star declares her a full warrior, but doesn't let her in on his plans. Maybe he'll change his mind one day. At least Hawkfrost is proud of her, and immediately asks her to go train the other apprentices. Breezepelt also finds out that Ivypool killed Antpelt and hates her, declaring that they will never be clanmates. Lionblaze and Cinderheart technically have a conversation. It consists of Lionheart trying to initiate small talk and Cinderheart being very irritable. Mousewhisker and Cherrypaw accidentally eat dangerous, deadly hemlock, and Leafpool saves them, with the help of Cinderheart, who has all the herb knowledge she could need. Leafpool is mad at Jayfeather for what he did to Cinderheart, and Cinderheart nearly breaks down under the weight of her unstoppable memories and shaky identity. Lionblaze tries to comfort her, but she gets lost in thought again, this time about Cinderpelt's apparently forbidden love, and Lionblaze walks away frustrated. Squirrelflight does get to comfort him briefly, leading Lionblaze to say that Squirrelflight was a good mother, and Squirrelflight to tell him how much she loves him and his siblings. Cinderheart and Cinderpelt being the same cat is now common knowledge through the clan, but a lot of gossip is still circulating about Hollyleaf too. Cinderheart comes to comfort Hollyleaf, Foxleaf scorns them for being the odd ones sticking together, and Millie says that they were best friends before Hollyleaf left. Okay, but were they actually? A Firestar finally announces that Soul is a traitor and a battle with Windclan is imminent, and to plan for it, they decide to prepare to fight in the tunnels to head them off before they reach ThunderClan territory, on the suggestion of Hollyleaf. She agrees to lead their training and turns out to be a great teacher, precise, concise, and confident in her methods, along with independently sharing the floor with Brightheart to ask if any of her methods for fighting with one eye would be applicable. Cinderheart is still having trouble with her identity, particularly now that many cats assume she'll just be a medicine cat, and she asks Jayfeather if she should move into his den. With Jayfeather and Briarlight in there, it's not currently big enough, but Dustpelt and Brackenfur think they could expand both the medicine den and the warrior's den to account for the increased numbers of the clan. Hollyleaf is getting along better with her clanmates, and Cinderheart is officially relieved of all warrior duties, but will continue to sleep in the warrior's den. This makes Lionblaze silently sad, because it's just another way that he's cut off from his love interest. Hollyleaf leads a patrol and meets Dawnpelt and Red Willow along the ShadowClan border. Dovewing is interested to see her again, but is still generally aggressive towards ThunderClan. However, Red Willow calms her down, since Ivypool is on the patrol and they are Dark Forest allies. Hollyleaf warns Ivypool to avoid half-clan relationships, under the assumption that something is going on with her and Red Willow, and Ivypool assures Dovewing that this would never happen. She's also really glad Dovewing is settling down with Bumblestripe now instead of mangy Tigerheart. At another gathering, Firestar announces that Hollyleaf is back, answering no further questions about where she went or why she was gone, and Dawnpelt suddenly speaks up to accuse Jayfeather of being a murderer, evidently without checking with Blackstar first. Dawnpelt has no evidence, beyond the vague notion that Jayfeather isn't kind, so we shouldn't believe that he was trying to save Flametail, but Tigerheart supports Dawnpelt. Blackstar doesn't speak against her, and the clans ask Jayfeather to step back from his duties, which he refuses as ThunderClan's only medicine cat. Thunder crashes down, so StarClan is angry at something, and ThunderClan flees home. Yellowfang assures Jayfeather in his dreams that no one there thinks he murdered Flametail, but then chastises him for allowing Cinderheart to become a medicine cat, which she has apparently changed her mind on. Jayfeather assumes someone else in StarClan must have told her off for it. Jayfeather doesn't plan to make either Cinderheart or Leafpool full medicine cats, but won't refuse their invaluable knowledge and experience, especially as a giant dark forest battle is coming. Jayfeather offers Cinderheart her own choice, and Cinderheart says what she really wants, but can't have, is Lionblaze. Jayfeather points out that she has a destiny too, but she can still shape her own life, and Cinderheart thanks him for the advice. Dovewing hears Sol leading Windclan warriors in the middle of the night, and ThunderClan goes to fight them in the tunnels. Ivypool briefly mentions to Dovewing that she's a warrior in the Dark Forest now, and Hollyleaf gathers that Dovewing is the third cat in the prophecy, giving only a few seconds of silence and no emotions, words, or actions before taking this in stride and making use of it. The cats attacking from Windclan have been pretty thoroughly brainwashed by Sol, and he is leading the fight himself to make sure they don't forget their grudge on ThunderClan. Hollyleaf confronts Sol directly and says that the way of the clans is always worth fighting for, and dying for if necessary. She would gladly kill him, but the code says to show mercy, so instead she's going to let him go, with the promise that if he ever returned, she would kill him. And that's where the book ends! Oh, okay. I have a lot to cover here. I know now exactly why I looked upon this book so fondly. It has my favorite rare warriors trope where they fill the time with adorable interactions that include and characterize our cast, and it has so many relationships, plot beats, and speeches that inspire me, both in how potentially wonderful they are and in how much they fall flat in easily avoidable ways. More than any other, this book is where I recognize so many of the building blocks that inspired the key elements of Paws of Stars, thematically, plot-wise, and in the relationships between our characters. However, the very fact that it is inspiring in this particular way is one of its biggest faults, because there are so many little areas in this book where something was almost amazing, if not for one or two large and problematic factors, and the overall book's composition, pacing, and role in Omen of the Stars feels aimless or even undecided. Let's start off with my very obvious favorite element, Hollyleaf, and I'll throw Sol in here since their plots intertwine so much. When we left her at the end of Power of Three, Hollyleaf was in a long and complex emotional spiral over her parentage along with her own actions, killing Ashfur and, a moon later, telling the entire gathering about their parentage and causing problems for her parents and brothers as a result. Since that time, her brothers discovered the third member of the prophecy, who was Dovewing and not her, and have occasionally made reference to the fact that her absence is complicated. They did want her back, but also know how much baggage she left behind. Hollyleaf's characterization here is very fitting as a follow-up to that. She spent her however many moons, maybe a year, given Dovewing and Ivypool's growth, in the tunnels, alone, reflecting on her actions. So the fact that she is now regretful, nervous, and more introverted around her gossiping clanmates makes a lot of sense. The one big part of her story I have a problem with is Brambleclaw's lie. He interrupts her to stop her from telling the truth about Ashfur's murder, so the clan believes that it was in self-defense. It's not as if this was a quick and forgotten moment either, because Hollyleaf, Lionblaze, and Jayfeather keep bringing it up for the rest of the book. However, nothing comes of it, and the lie is just allowed to continue through to the end. That said, given that the entire final battle and confrontation was squeezed into the short and final chapter of the book, it's not as if they had space to put any follow-up in. Maybe they will follow up on this lie in the next book? Anyway, that aside, I really appreciate the parallel they tried to have between her and Soul. In this book, Soul changes his behavior pattern from previous books by actively lying to everyone and even participating in a battle he started himself. It's not nearly as passive and stupid as his behavior in Power of Three was, but it is just about as aimless as before. He's generically trying to get revenge, but on who? He visits ShadowClan exactly once and nothing comes of it, but the rest of his manipulations are just between ThunderClan and Windclan. And he wasn't even aware before now that Hollylion and Jay were the ones who helped to turn Blackstar against him. Really, what does Soul get out of this? Or why does he want it? What was his goal, ever, across any of his time in the series? Maybe those SkyClan mangas coming out will help us answer that, but it's a little too late, as this is his last main series appearance. Soul isn't really interesting in this book on his own, but they do appear to be using him as a parallel to a character who is interesting. Where Soul has always been a cat who just takes credit for events happening around him to make himself seem more knowledgeable than he is and get more credit than he deserves, Hollyleaf has become someone who does good for her clan without being recognized, even hiding herself to keep her clanmates from knowing she exists. And when she finally does step into confidence, it is only in using the skills she has genuinely gained from personal experience to train her clanmates in useful techniques to help them fight off an oncoming attack. Basically, Soul makes Hollyleaf's new strengths much easier to see. Their confrontation in the final chapter also speaks to this parallel and how Hollyleaf has changed since Power of Three, as Soul is still really only concerned with his own feelings and goals, while Hollyleaf has learned to protect her clan and the code without getting hung up on jealousy over Dovewing or revenge on Soul. She lets him go because she is protecting the code that she believes in, and broke herself in Sunrise, but makes it clear that, as he is outside the code, this is his only chance to run. I love this parallel conceptually, but it could be a lot stronger if it was built earlier into their characters, or if either Soul or Hollyleaf were clearly defined in either Power of Three or here. They had one scene in Long Shadows where Soul came to Hollyleaf, told her privately how much she needed him, and implied that he knew she wasn't one of the three, but it never really got to the level of a parallel. And both Soul and Hollyleaf have always fluctuated and meandered as characters. Oh, and you would also really need to either remove Brambleclaw's lie entirely, or have Hollyleaf follow up on it and reject it in order to cement her growth since Power of Three. That said, this is definitely one of the strongest parts of the book in terms of inspiring me, and this book coming out is what originally cemented Hollyleaf as my favorite character in the series. Speaking of Hollyleaf parallels, let's also discuss Dawnpelt. The ShadowClan trio has always had some extremely vague connections to the Power of Three trio, with Flametail and Jayfeather as grumpy medicine cats, Tigerheart and Lionblaze as inconsistent but usually well-meaning, big, dumb, strong guys, and Dawnpelt and Hollyleaf as intelligent but extremely emotional she-cats. And here, with Dawnpelt standing up to speak at the gathering against her leader's wishes to accuse someone formally in front of all the clans more than a moon after the key event takes place, her parallel to Hollyleaf has never been more obvious. I find it cool as well that when Dawnpelt first finds out about Hollyleaf's return, and despite her current aggression towards everyone in ThunderClan, she is more interested in Hollyleaf than angry. That said, Dawnpelt as a character and her accusation of Jayfeather are not particularly complex or well-handled. Dawnpelt is definitely angry about Flametail, but really, why does she blame Jayfeather? And why hasn't she done anything before now? It's been at least 2 moons since he died. Tigerheart even has to give the same speech to Dovewing twice about how, oh wow, she's definitely going to try something. But it still takes until chapter 23 of 25 for her to do anything. And by that point, they have no time to explore or resolve or even escalate this conflict. Dawnpelt's entire argument is just that Jayfeather tends to be grumpy, so naturally he would also be a murderer, which makes precisely no sense. If this were an accusation with even a little bit of truth, even if it didn't hurt Jayfeather socially, it might get to him emotionally. Right now, all that has happened is that some cats told him not to be a medicine cat, he said, no, that's stupid, and everyone went back to business. Since the medicine cats are split up right now on StarClan's orders, he doesn't even have to stop representing ThunderClan as a medicine cat. Dawnpelt's story is definitely striking in concept and has potential, but needs a lot of tinkering in its content, characterization, and placement in and effect on the plot in order to be executed well. Also in Jayfeather Circle, we have StarClan, and Yellowfang in particular as our main representative this book. Wow, she is awful here. Apparently, Yellowfang is going against the will of the rest of StarClan to force Jayfeather to make Cinderheart remember Cinderpelt, which is awful on its own. Then, after being chastised for that, she instead berates Jayfeather for following her own orders rather than just admitting she was wrong. And then when Jayfeather is accused of Flametail's murder and a StarClan sign stops the gathering, rather than telling any of the other medicine cats, "That is silly, Jayfeather did not murder Flametail," she goes to tell Jayfeather that they're not mad at him and leaves it at that. Everything she does is actively counterproductive, and this is with the already stupid choice StarClan is making to split up by clan and have the medicine cats stop talking. If we could get more of the general StarClan opinion on that, maybe we could at least begin to understand that decision. But as it is, we just have to know that is still happening throughout this book without seeing any further evidence, reasoning, or progression on it. Nothing about Yellowfang here is good for the plot of the book, and it certainly goes against her own previous characterization, so it's undoubtedly the worst aspect. Improving this book would mean cutting absolutely everything she ever says and does here. Perhaps it isn't a surprise, then, with everything around Jayfeather being botched, that Jayfeather himself doesn't come off well in this book. He's extremely snippety, more so than usual, even around cats like Briarlight, Hollyleaf, Cinderheart, or Dovewing, who he hypothetically cares about, and suffers from the arc-wide problem of just not talking to people about either his or their problems. Even from the first chapter, he hears how Dovewing is suffering some sort of traumatic effect, including bad dreams after her experiences in the mountains, and his solution is to do literally nothing. Later, when he figures out that she has lost her magical hearing, he presses her into confessing it until she runs away, and then immediately goes back to business, figuring out the next mystery. Moments like these are scattered throughout the book, where he learns something is going wrong and makes an active choice to ignore it, causing Jayfeather to lose what has been one of his most important and endearing traits: compassion. He has always been grumpy, but he had previously used that as a shield, or method of speaking, while still caring fiercely about cats he was choosing to protect. The closest he gets here is with Cinderheart, offering her a choice of who to be after he returns her memories, but it's still unclear to the reader why he thought that would be a good thing to do in the first place. Actually, let's cover Cinderheart on her own, briefly. Her arc with learning about her past life as Cinderpelt is one that I think comes close to being compelling. She makes it very clear that, with Cinderpelt's memories and herb knowledge, she's not sure who she is, or really who she's supposed to be. Being a medicine cat would help out the clan, but it would mean taking away her own identity, and all she really wants is to be a warrior with Lionblaze. The issue here is that she is told immediately, when she gets her memories, that she is still Cinderheart and that is all she ever needs to be. And she keeps being told this over and over in various chapters until one day, she just accepts it. She also isn't actually needed as a medicine cat when Jayfeather, Leafpool, Briarlight, and Brightheart all have and are using those skills. And there really isn't anything standing in the way of her and Lionblaze. It also falls a bit flat because Cinderheart herself was not an especially developed or concrete character before this in the way that Cinderpelt was. So other than knowing that she loves Lionblaze, and apparently was Hollyleaf's best friend, despite us never seeing any evidence of that, it's hard to tell who Cinderheart is or what she is holding on to. I think many of the individual lines around Cinderheart's arc are well written and even inspiring, and it's an interesting idea to work with, but her story in this book as a whole comes off as more confusing or frustrating than anything else. Speaking of confusing and frustrating, let's talk about her lover. Lionblaze is, without question, the most useless protagonist here. He has 6 chapters in this book, and not one of them develops him as a character or a part of the story. All of his chapters are just filled with him watching other cats do things, perhaps with a single reference to how he wants to be with Cinderheart but can't. I've already talked about how Cinderheart's objections to the relationship don't make sense, so I won't repeat myself. But here, that relationship becomes the only thing Lionblaze is involved in. Even the return of Hollyleaf isn't able to spark him to develop or converse with her in any interesting way. To fix this man, you would need to give him back the sort of personality, goals, and fears he had during the best parts of Power of Three. Have him care about and act on his care for events like his sister coming back, give him more relationships to interact with so he can have a story of his own, and seriously overhaul his entire relationship with Cinderheart. Fixing Owen of the Stars Lionblaze would undoubtedly be the hardest challenge in making the arc cohesive. And I'll admit, I really enjoyed doing it. That said, Lionblaze being distractingly boring in Omen of the Stars is far from controversial. What I think will have more heads turning is that Ivypool right now is, in some ways, just as aimless as Lionblaze. And it all has to do with two big problems that have plagued the whole arc: what the Dark Forest is, and the insistence of the authors having our characters just not speak to each other. Again, I went over a lot of this in my previous video on Sign of the Moon, so I'll try not to repeat myself too much. But the Dark Forest plot is not currently moving forward, and Ivypool is standing still alongside it. The Dark Forest here is so comically evil that it tortures its own trainees for fun, declares openly to all of them that they will be attacking the clans, and just expects everyone there from the clans to either convert to evil alongside them or keep coming back out of fear. This is true even for brand new trainees introduced in this book who apparently turn out noticeably more bloodthirsty after just a few days. Why someone like Birchfall joined the Dark Forest is entirely glossed over, as his excuse of more training being good for the clan falls apart when the training they are receiving is only hurting them, and when they have been explicitly told by Brokenstar that they will be fighting the clans. This is not a seductive, secretive, or manipulative force anymore. This is very unequivocally a band of evil guys, and unless your name is Breezepelt, Red Willow, or apparently Tigerheart or Antpelt, you are expected to remove that fact from your memory every time someone asks why you keep going back. Ivypool, in turn, has very little to investigate here, aside from who is coming to the Dark Forest and when they plan to attack. When it comes to who trains there or what their training is like, Ivypool has explicitly hidden or even lied about this information to every one of the 3 cats she is supposed to be spying for. She has not given them a single piece of specific information, and even Jayfeather comments on how she doesn't talk about her time there. Any pretense of Ivypool risking her life for a noble purpose, then, seems like a lie. Not from Ivypool, but from the authors. The one and only thing she progresses on in a concrete sense is becoming a warrior in the Dark Forest, a concept only invented in this book, and even then, before Ivypool asked to become one, it was a term implied to only describe dead residents of the Dark Forest. Ivypool decided to kill a man in order to earn that title, and literally nothing has come of it yet other than her training the trainees instead of training with them. Brokenstar has told her absolutely nothing, and I'm sure will continue to tell her nothing until just before the battle begins. And Ivypool makes no further attempts to talk with him, Tigerstar, Mapleshade, or otherwise to gain more information. Again, Ivypool's story in concept could be very compelling, even gripping, with how she puts herself in danger to save the clans. But right now, with how she and the Dark Forest are written, it is very difficult to be anything other than frustrated while reading her chapters. I'd also like to take a quick aside to talk about Antpelt, as I'm pretty sure the fandom interpretation of him has muddled things over the years. Antpelt used to be a pretty passive, normal Dark Forest trainee who was killed by Thistleclaw, and was bound to the Dark Forest permanently. Now, with no reasoning or progression, he is suddenly a gleefully vicious, heartless fighter who has completely turned his back not just on love for his former clan, but even to his fellow trainees in the Dark Forest, including Breezepelt, who seemed to care for him in some way, and Ivypool, who actively helped him. And yes, you certainly could make arguments to justify this change. Maybe he's playing up his ruthlessness in order to keep himself safe here, or being killed by Thistleclaw taught him that only the strong survive. Maybe he's leaning into this persona because it could get him more power, or the Dark Forest itself is driving him mad in some fashion. There are plenty of reasons you could make, but the thing is, not one of those was shown or told to us in this book. We are just expected to take it as fact that Antpelt is a monster now, and any explanation you feel is necessary is left as an exercise for the reader. And it's not even a good or necessary change. This turn not only makes him a more confusing and less compelling character, but also makes it much less of a hard choice when Ivypool opts to kill him for a higher position in the Dark Forest. Fixing Antpelt would, in my mind, have to do with showing us the sort of cat he is and keeping him consistent. Perhaps even using him as a key example of the sort of brainwashing the Dark Forest has been doing to its trainees, or even fellow residents. He should be a vessel to show us the power of the Dark Forest, but for that to be true, we need to feel sympathy for him and understand why and how he changes. In the end, the only protagonist I think was genuinely done well in this book was Dovewing. As the only protagonist to continue her characterization and even meaningfully follow up from her various plots in the previous books, her story is much more interesting to follow. Dovewing has been used over and over for her power, by Jayfeather and Lineblaze, and even explicitly by Firestar in this book, so having it go away for a while when she comes back from the mountains, as a result of both the trauma she experienced there and the massive overstimulating environment, both makes a lot of sense and has a lot of impact. You can really feel how hard it is for Dovewing to have lost this piece of herself, and to be worried over whether or not she can provide for cats as she did before, and as was her only means of connection with the few cats she was even pseudo-close to. Yet she is also trying to use this time to reach out to other, more normal cats, like Purdy and some of the other young warriors. Even Whitewing tries to reach out to her, as one of our few examples of active warriors parenting in adulthood, and though she can't understand what her daughter is going through and gives some very, very bad advice, she is trying because it is consistent and obvious that Dovewing is hurt. Additionally, Dovewing and her sister are consistently getting along much better than they had before Ivypool started, said she was spying for them. They back each other up and work to understand each other, though there is still the consistent series problem of them not actually letting each other in on big or important events or feelings in their life. Dovewing also both remembers and upholds her decision to not forgive Tigerheart after the manipulative behavior he expressed in Night Whispers. She's being competently written, and her chapters would be an unequivocal joy to read, if not for... Yeah, okay. I'll talk about Bumblestripe. So, I don't actually dislike anything about Bumblestripe's writing specifically. I think he works perfectly as an overly pushy, affectionate Tom who can't even conceive of someone he likes not returning his affections. He makes his love increasingly obvious, lets Dovewing know what he wants, and can't take a hint about her level of love not matching his own. He's actually very consistently written and fills his role very well. The part I don't like is how everyone besides Bumblestripe reacts to him. Without exception, every cat who is not Bumblestripe or Dovewing, and who hears about or sees evidence of their potential relationship, loves it unabashedly and pushes Dovewing to get together with him. We have everything from Blossomfall wanting Dovewing to return her brother's affections, and now getting jealous that her brother hangs around Dovewing so much, to Cinderheart projecting her already nonsense feelings about Lineblaze onto Dovewing, and saying that she should be with him because there isn't anything in the way, to Whitewing coming to say that Bumblestripe is such a great guy and Dovewing will have to settle down and have kits someday, so she may as well take him. Even more casual things like Jayfeather or Ivypool finding out about their relationship only involve the two of them being fine with or excited for Dovewing about this great opportunity. Not once does anyone ask Dovewing how she feels about Bumblestripe or offer her the choice of turning him down. And reading this book, it feels like Dovewing herself is worn down over the course of it to just accept Bumblestripe as a mate because it's inevitable, or that he's at least better than being with Tigerheart. Let me say unequivocally that this is not romantic. Nothing about this is romantic. There is nothing Dovewing ever manages to love about Bumblestripe other than that he feels like a safe choice. People are not always going to return your affections, and those who are in a society like Dovewing's may not know how to, or even that they can, say no. If you are pursuing someone, you have to pay attention to how they feel, what they initiate, and check in with them directly to ensure that you aren't forcing them into a relationship they don't actually want. I love Bumblestripe as a concept, but to do this story well, you would have to have someone, anyone around who could help Dovewing learn how to say no and let Bumblestripe down. A Bumblestripe and Dovewing love story where everyone around them thinks this is a great couple or even berates Dovewing for not being with Bumblestripe is just uncomfortable. With all that done, we have one more thing left to talk about. This is the 5th book of the arc, meaning that the next book is the last in Omen of the Stars. In that one book, as a bare minimum, and while assuming that Hollyleaf doesn't need another arc, we are going to have the entire plan for and execution of the Dark Forest battle, both on the side of the villains and the clans, a wrap-up of Lineblaze and Cinderheart, and Dovewing and apparently Bumblestripe's romance stories, Jayfeather and Dawnpelt's confrontation over Flametail's death, StarClan's divide down clan lines, oh, and just a minor thing, the 4th cat prophecy. Jayfeather learned about this prophecy at the very end of the last book, but throughout this one, which takes place over 2 moons, he does not tell anyone else, including the 3 or Firestar, about it, and only spares it 3 thoughts over the course of the book. In the first, he is expositing for the audience that he was given a prophecy, and in the second and third, he considers whether or not Hollyleaf or Mousefur could be the fourth cat they need. He does no further thinking or investigation, never asks StarClan about them, and never talks about it with anyone. And, of course, Dovewing and Lionblaze couldn't have ideas for the fourth cat since they don't even know that prophecy exists yet. Basically, an awful lot of giant and seemingly disconnected stories have been introduced that need resolutions in the space of just one book. So The Last Hope is going to be a very difficult book to compose, especially without being rushed. Whew. Well, that was an extremely long episode, even more so than Crooked Star's Promise. But I knew, with this book above all others, I wanted to dig in with a fine-tooth comb, both to find the elements I love and think about so deeply that they sat in my head for almost a decade, pushing me to eventually write Paws of Stars, and to find the numerous flaws in almost every aspect of the story and characters that pricked at me for almost a decade, pushing me to eventually write Paws of Stars. The Forgotten Warrior is a book that, for me in the modern day, is really hard to judge by itself, because nearly every tiny crevice of it inspires me in what it does right and wrong, and I spent years creating the concrete result of that inspiration. It is a book with tons of great character moments, bold and interesting new ideas, and some great striking characters with meaningful stories to tell. But it is also a book where the execution of each element and the story as a whole ultimately falls flat. In the end, I can't think of this as my favorite book anymore. Crooked Star's Promise is a much more well-told and cohesive story, and Faded Echoes comes much closer in execution to the version of Almond of the Stars that properly utilizes all of its characters and story elements. However, The Forgotten Warrior does now sit at the third spot in my current list, because as much as it falters, it has far too many striking ideas, memorable characters, and adorable uses of its wide and comforting cast for me to really dislike it. This is far from the best book in Warriors, but after everything, it remains one of my favorites. Another book with that claim will be coming up soon, but first we will have to face one I do not like nearly as much, the continuation of SkyClan and Soul's story. Maybe, at least, we will find out more about this elusive, inconsistent, confusing Tom when we return for the next episode of our trip through time.